Greetings from IAS. We are very glad that you have decided to join us again today for a very important topic, and this topic is racial discrimination. We are reporting to you from IAS in Sri Lanka, Vite, Philippines. For those who are watching online and those who may be watching on TV, we are located outside of Manila, the capital city of the Philippines, which is 35 to 40 kilometers away from the airport of Manila. And we have a very important topic we're discussing today, and that is racial discrimination. As you know, IAS is an international university, and we have people from all different backgrounds, regions, languages, colors, cultures, ages, and gender. And so we deal with so many different opinions and perspectives on different things. And so today we have decided to address something that is less talked about, and that is racial discrimination. But before we start, I want to let you know that the views and opinions expressed on this program, they are not the reflection of IAS. They are just simple personal opinions. And the people you're going to see in this program, they are not experts on racial discrimination. They have not done a PhD on that. These are just personal views from their personal experience, their readings, their research, and things that they have seen and what they have heard. And so if you have a question for us based on what is said here, please contact us. And at the end of the program, I'll be sharing with you the different communication channels. So I want to start with the introduction of the members we have here. Let's start on this side. Tell us who you are, your country of origin, and what you're currently doing here at IAS. I'm going to start on my far left.
Good afternoon. I am Pastor Olawatse Khabasiani. My country of origin is Zimbabwe, but I'm a citizen of Botswana. I'm a teacher here at IAS with the Applied Theology Department.
Thank you so much. Welcome, Dr. Khabasiani.
My name is Andrew Burrows. I come from the United States. I live here in the Philippines, and I am a student in the seminary.
Thank you so much, Andrew. It's good to have you here. Let's go to the next.
Hello, my name is David. I am an MBA student studying management, and I'm from the United States.
Welcome, David.
Hi, I'm Nadine Collins. I am from St. Lucia. I was born there. I'm also a citizen of Barbados, and currently I reside in the US because my husband is American.
Welcome back, Dr. Nadine. And so we want to start with the first question. I'm going to ask Andrew to address this one. What is racial discrimination?
From my experience, my opinion, racial discrimination is when you choose to reject someone based upon sex, color of their skin, country of origin, any of those types of factors that play in. So, for example, in the United States, Irish were not accepted very much because they were Catholic. So on a religious standpoint, Americans are a Protestant nation, and they rejected Catholicism for a very long time, so that it was considered a prejudice or a racist based upon religion.
Wow. You have expanded the definition. I didn't know it would include even sex and even a religion. Thank you so much. Let's go to you.
All right. I've spent at least 15 years between the UK and the US, so I can speak a little to that. Racial discrimination is an innate human heart problem where there is unequal treatment of other groups of people based on their country of origin, based on their ethnicity, or even based on their race.
Okay. You know, I see David thinking deep right now. I think you want to add another aspect to this. So we see some overlap between the two definitions. Do you want to add another perspective to this definition?
Okay. Well, I'm already holding the microphone. So I would also add to that, assuming the best or worst about an individual based upon generalizations, whether those are based on real facts or just fabricated about that person's whatever they were born with, whether it's national identity or race or skin color.
Thank you so much. I want to emphasize something he has underlined here, and that is either positive or negative treatment of somebody from a different color or nation. It can actually be positive, although most of the times when we talk about racial discrimination, we're looking at it from the negative perspective. But can we have a time when somebody is racially discriminated against, but it is done positively? Can you just give a brief example on that? And that is true. The definition of racial discrimination, it can also be something positive. But in the process of discriminating positively against somebody, you are discriminating negatively against somebody else. But can you give just a quick example on that?
Okay, an easy example is there's one common belief in America that Asians are very good at math. Now, that may be absolutely true. But I went over and taught in Korea for a couple of years, and a lot of the children I talked to, they hated math.
Oh.
So it's not always true.
There you go. And looking at this from an education perspective, if you came from the US and you thought all the Asians are good in math, and if a child was not doing well in math, he would say, okay, he's just pretending not to do well. I'm not going to help that kid. So we may end up not helping that person because we had this kind of positive discrimination, which was not actually true. Okay, Dr. Nadine, you want to add something else to the definition?
Not really, but just to what he said and your question about the positive aspects of it. In the US, there is a serious problem with something we call white privilege, where you actually have people getting by in life because of the color of their skin. And I don't think it's just in the US, because I saw it while I was here as well as a student, that when I go around to see how people react to white people versus to people of other races. So that is a positive for somebody and a negative for somebody else. When you get a position in a company, you get a job, you get a particular favor done for you because of the color of your skin. And I also saw that happen as well while I lived in Trinidad, where people of Indian descent had that same type of privilege, where they would get accepted, for example, into the School of Engineering and the School of Law and Medicine because of their last name. But then the experiments were done to see, because I first, when I got there, I thought, wow, they must be the bright ones, because when I look at graduation, they were the only ones graduating from these schools, until I did sociology and I found out that people are accepted based on the last name, and the last names are very distinctly Indian or black. And so experiments were done where black people would actually assign themselves an Indian name and get accepted into the schools. And we have that same problem in the US as well. Experiments have been done showing that black people who had the same qualifications and everything else apply for jobs, and 50% of the time they will not get a call back because you could identify them by their names. And so now parents are being cautioned, black parents, not to give your children these distinctly black names because of what may happen to them in the future. So I think that's a serious problem that we're having.
Wow, that is quite a lot of unpacking happening, and I think you're addressing already the second question. I'm going to just ask you to add to that, but let me add to that. This means when you have Wambaleka, that may get you in trouble in some places. In other places, it may be a good thing. Oh, Wambaleka is one of us. That sounds like one of us. In other places, Wambaleka is, oh no, that's not one of us. In some places, I always tease Sir Ebenezer. I say, Ebenezer, you have one of the most powerful names. Ebenezer Dankwa. That's a powerful name. Names, people can actually, racial discrimination can even expand to the names, which is something I never actually thought about. Do you want to add, now let's go to the next question, since we have already started on that. Do you have some experiences that you have either seen or heard or experienced yourself that deal that showed that, okay, there was some kind of racial discrimination in this?
Well, I live in
We
the
don't
US.
mention names.
No, I live in the US. My
Okay.
husband is half white. So for a long time, I would argue with him about this issue of racial discrimination. And he could not get what I was saying. I remember even the night before we got married, that was one of the bigger issues that we were talking about over dinner. And he was saying, if people, comply with the police, then they will not get killed or arrested. But statistics continue to show that that is not the case. In fact, it is said, and I was reading some statistics preparing for this, that 33% of, for example, I see it every day on TV in the US, is what I'm trying to say. I actually do not watch TV, but it's in my news feed on Facebook. Every day, you have black men being killed because of the color of their skin. 33% of the time, these men are unarmed. That's what the research is saying. And so I see it every day. Just parents being just afraid of their kids going out, their boy children, because they will be sidelined by the police officers. Personally, I have not had extreme experiences with racism, but I've witnessed it. One of the places I can say I see it happening to me a lot because I travel all the time is on the airports. I distinctly remember somewhere in my trip, I can't remember where I was going, but I was somewhere along my lines before I got here. And I was pulled aside, and I was checked, right? There's another word, frisked. And so when they frisked me, I say, okay, I feel very uncomfortable with it. And I stood there waiting for my stuff to come. And I noted that every black person that walked through that, the officer would pull them aside. Wow. And I saw it. I actually went to speak to some of the black people after. Because I'm like, did you notice that we were the only ones he pulled aside? And everybody said yes. Specifically in Trinidad, I remember one experience where a girlfriend of mine, she's Indian, but she's St. Lucian. We're studying in an island where there are 50% blacks, 50% Indian, and a lot of race issues. Her landlord did not know that she was a St. Lucian because she was Indian, so he naturally assumed that she was a Trinidadian. And she was dating a black guy, and he said to her, "Don't bring these monkeys on his compound," referring to us, her friends and her boyfriend. So that was, I think, like my closest in terms of my personal stuff and mostly the airport thing. But I've seen a lot more of it, like even when I came here, I remember meeting a lady I really liked. She was black from Africa. And I met a Caucasian lady from another country. And this lady would hug me until I heard a story about how she treated that black lady when that black lady came to IS. And after that, my relationship with her changed because I thought, you cannot be hugging me if you treat a black woman like that because I'm black too. So I took it kind of personal and so on. I still remained cordial with her, but I changed the nature of my relationship because right here I noticed a lot of that kind of stuff, whether on campus or off campus.
Thank you so much. That's a lot. That's a lot of information that shows us that this issue is real. We may decide to put a blind eye on it, but it's real. And everybody faces it. It doesn't matter which color you come from, which race you come from. You face it one way or another. Let's hear from Andrew.
I'd like to say something. I served in the United States Marine Corps, so we teach ourselves to think green. So we don't think about colors. We always say, oh, he's a dark green Marine. He's a light green Marine. Or he might have a Hispanic green Marine. But we don't really think in race, and the reason is because we all bleed red. You have to, in the Marine Corps, it doesn't make a difference what your color is. You have to depend on the guy to the left and to the right of you because they're going to save your life and you're going to save their life. And that's combat. And, in the book that, I can't think of his name now, not the book, but William Shakespeare writes Henry V, and he talks about in there, who sheds his blood with me today, he shall be my brother indeed. In that situation, you become brothers. Matter of fact, there's a Filipino Navy corpsman that worked with the Marine Corps, and I knew him in the Marine Corps, and he lives here in Silong. And we're brothers because we served together. But with that being said, have I seen or experienced racial discrimination? I would have to say yes. I know personally I have seen people get promoted because of their ethnicity. They're black. And I can remember in the United States Marine Corps, they wanted black generals. So they promoted 3 men to being a black general, which I think was a slap in their face. Now, being a general is great, but getting promoted because of your skin color is not good, because then you can say, I didn't earn this. And when you earn that rank, you feel good. You know that you accomplished it. But if you get it because of your skin color, how does that make you feel? I'm thinking George Washington Carver, one of my favorite people I like to read about, had everything stacked against him, and yet he invented so much. I'm thinking about the Turkish airmen of World War II. They had the highest standard of all pilots, and they had to have a degree, they had to be physically fit, they flushed them out and washed them out, but no one earned more battle honors. And every time they went up for a mission to protect the big boys or the B-17s, not a single B-17 was shot down because of the pride that they had. And they got there because they had to work against it. So I've seen it in my life, and I've seen it in other people's lives. And I think sometimes we have to be careful that we don't overstep the bounds and start passing laws or doing things to people because we want to equal it out. Because in the long run, again, I go back to the Marine Corps, you want people there because they're good. You don't want people there because they're not good.
Thank you so much, Andrew. What you have said links to what David said earlier, that part of the racial discrimination, of course, you get promotion because of your skin color. And I wanted to ask that question earlier when he talked about it during the definition. But I just want to highlight that, and then I'll come back to you, David, for that question, the same question. Actually, when we promote people based on their skin color or race or country, we are not actually doing them any favor. Whether they are black or white or brown or other colors in the mixture, we are not doing them any favor because they are not going to perform to their very best abilities. And actually, it may affect the work. It may affect the institution. It may affect the organization. It may affect the business. And I'm sure each one of us here, you think about that from wherever you have been in different parts of the world, you can probably agree with that. Let's come back to you. Experience, any experience you've had?
Well, sure. There have been many accounts I've read also of people who have been denied promotions because of not being the right race or whatever. And the way I was thinking about it was that it seems like when there's a lot of white people, then they complain it's not diverse enough. But if there's like an all black or all Hispanic or all Asian, no one ever seems to complain about a lack of diversity. So it seems like one group of people is expected to make these allowances, which are good and we're more than willing to do, but there should be some reciprocation as well. I think it's only fair.
You know, you have hit on another important point. That shows, if you read literature on cultural diversity, I used to teach, well, that was one of the courses I used to teach in the United States. It shows that in a context where one specific race is always dominant, let's say in the Caribbean, where the Indian race is more predominant, by default, people in that group struggle to claim other rights simply because they are also in that group. And so when you try to claim that, you can be easily labeled as racist. Because you're trying to claim the same right like everybody else. Because by default, everybody believes that, hey, you are already privileged person. You should not complain about anything. And so that happens. When you read in the literature on this, you'll find that that sometimes also happens when somebody who is privileged cannot claim any specific privilege that other minority groups have simply because you are in the privileged group. Anyways, let's go to Dr. Gabasiane.
I've watched some documentaries, especially on wildlife, and I've seen that when the lioness has caught its prey and the little cubs are coming to feed there, you find that there is one or two weaker ones. And some of the lionesses, of course, will just ignore and let it be the survival of the fittest, and they end up dying. But in other prides, you find that there are some lionesses that actually defend and make sure that the weaker one has it. I'm saying this because really we can speak about equal opportunities, but at the same time we need to find a balance and take some cues from what the lionesses are doing. Do you still want me to say an experience?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
One.
Just one. So I was a student in the UK studying mining there, and one of my colleagues, it was time for us to go for vocational training. And what could that place be other than South Africa? Now, if I speak of the late 1980s, you know that was at the peak of apartheid system. So we went to the city of Kimberley, where there's diamond mining. And when we got to the accommodation, it was good. We could see everybody is given the same accommodation, and so it was beautiful. The following day, we met at the cafeteria to have our meals. So I asked my contemporary, I said, how are you getting to the mining place? He said, well, I've got a Peugeot 404. They gave me a car. I'm using it. And we just waited for our transport to come, and then a van came, or a combi. There was a driver there, and he picked us up. We were introduced to the training manager. And then he said, my friends, we need to discuss on how you're going to get here. Beginning tomorrow, we supply you with bicycles. So you have to ride over to, talk about a 5-minute drive. That translates to about 15 minutes across the town. So I had to do some quick thinking, even though I had some discussion to do with my God later. So I said, unfortunately, I don't know how to ride a bicycle. And my other two friends, who were also from Botswana, they said, how can you say you don't know how to ride a bicycle? What's wrong with you? And then I said, well, to the training manager, I said, look, I can ride at the back if it has got a carrier, or they can teach me how to ride a bicycle. Then he said, no, that's not safe. That's not going to work. He said, oh, what are we going to do now? Okay, be using this van and have this driver until we work out something for you. After 3 days or 4, I'm discussing with my friends from Botswana. They are coming from different schools also. And I'm telling them, there's this Ghanaian guy back at school there. Now I've forgotten. Back at school there, he didn't know how to ride a bicycle, so I was trying to show him how to ride a bicycle. They said, what? You said you don't know how to ride a bicycle. I said, guys, you didn't see it. I cannot let that classmate of mine go back and shine on me and tell the other students that he was driving a vehicle and we were going on bicycles. No ways. Like I said, I had a discussion with my God. Yeah. And I asked for forgiveness for not telling the truth. But when we got to the mine, when there was this orientation, we're being shown around, I realized that racial discrimination actually goes deep into the ground, underground. And the mining foreman said, listen, gentlemen, whenever you see a door with a white dot, you must know it's for white people, okay? That's the restrooms. When you see a door with a black dot, you must know that it's for black people. Is that clear? Yes, sir.
Thank you so much. You know, today we may look back and laugh at what was happening, how human beings could do this to other human beings. It is true that this has become more subtle than it was in the 80s in South Africa and maybe other parts of the world. It was really, really open. Now it's a lot more subtle, but we're just grateful for those who worked hard to make sure that will not happen anymore. David, here's another question for you. How serious is racial discrimination in the Western world?
It's become
If somebody says, I'm going to take you to court because you are discriminating against me because of my race, whether it's a black or white or Latino or Asian, there's all this mixture in the United States.
I haven't really paid attention to the court system in that respect. But I've noticed trends happening. I'm noticing that with affirmative action and other programs like that, there starts to be kind of a hierarchy of levels of victimhood. And so now there's meritocracy, where you can be given opportunities based upon merit, coupled with varying degrees of victimhood, which different groups of any background can kind of add together to get some sort of advantage. And I'm noticing a lot of people are getting pretty bitter about that. I'm noticing the rise, especially in places like Charlottesville last year and then this year. I saw people chanting blood and soil on video. That's a Nazi slogan. I thought we were all past that. And I think people have not had as many opportunities as they hoped that they would get as a result of globalization, that maybe it just went a little bit too fast, and now that lag, that latency is creating a lot of power vacuum for a lot of ideologies to come in that aren't so good.
Thank you so much for bringing that Charleston story. For those who watch the news of the West, you know how bad it has been recently in the United States. It's been really, really bad. And, I always like to try to find beauty in garbage. Whenever this happens in the United States, when an innocent person was killed or not so innocent person was killed because of a race, when you go through the different stories, you will always find at least one person who will step that line to hold the hand of the other person. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about. I have seen a black cop hugging a white lady. I have seen a white cop carrying a black man who is injured in the midst of chaos, where people think, okay, this one is my enemy, that one is my enemy. But out of all this mess, you will always find one specific individual who is willing to actually make a difference. And I think this is what is expected from us. As scholars, as Christians, we are expected to go beyond the discrimination that we are experiencing and to defend the minority, to defend the oppressed. It doesn't matter what color, what country, what age, what linguistic background they come from. Let's go to Andrew.
How serious is racial discrimination in the West? Well, whatever you look for in life, you will find. If you look for trouble, you can find trouble. If you look for racial discrimination, you'll find it. If you look for the opposite, you can find it too. I think sometimes we make it big. I know very well the news has a bias, and they have a way to drive up their ratings through sensationalism. And I know that sometimes the news reports on good things, and I know the news a lot of times reports on things that is not well. And for example, a friend of mine was a teacher in Michigan. And this was at the beginning of all the school shootings in the United States. And a boy came to school with a screwdriver and stabbed a bunch of kids in the throat. And the news refused to come because it was not used with a gun. Now, so the news tends to be very biased because they have an agenda. I know what racial discrimination is. It is to segregate according to tribe, clan, because if you can divide, you can conquer. I believe the racial content within the United States is done, if I may even go into little conspiracy theories, but I don't care for those, is based upon, as an Adventist, end-time events to try to separate people based upon race, creed, so that they can find someone to be the victim or the scapegoat. So is it serious? Yes, it can be a very serious thing. But if you look for it, you will find it. If you don't look for it, sometimes you might find it, but it depends upon your attitude. I know it's out there. I know that there's still people who live in the backwards area, but there's a lot of people out there that are very good. And so for me, I've lived in West Virginia where we had one black boy who went to the school, and his name was Sam, and everybody loved him because he was the only black guy in the school. And then I've went to areas where there's a lot of black guys and only, a few white guys. So it's not as bad as what it is, but people can make it worse than what it is. So whatever you look for in life, you will find it.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Let's quickly go to Dr. Nadine, and then we'll go to Dr. Gabasian.
Yes, I like that question very much. And I didn't have to dig or look any big set of looking to find a real answer to this question. Racial discrimination is a serious problem in the Western world. Actually, I think from an Adventist perspective, we tend to try to blind our eyes to the reality of things. We pretend as if we do not speak about something, if we ignore it, then it doesn't exist. Racial discrimination is one of these things in our church, and sometimes in America as well. I just quickly found some statistics. 75% of white people in the US believe that racial discrimination doesn't exist. 75%. I didn't make up these figures. They're on Google, right? And many presentations on YouTube as well. 75%. This is an issue in the Western world, specifically in the US. Why? Because when we look at the statistics of what's going on, the persons who are generally exonerated from serious crimes are generally black people. Crimes that they did not commit, by the way. They were jailed, sometimes sentenced to life imprisonment, and so on, for crimes they did not commit because of the color of their skin. 33% of black men shot, like I mentioned earlier on, are unarmed. They say that even though white people and black people use drugs around the same rate, they are 3 times more likely to be arrested and sentenced because of the color of their skin. If we go into the education system, we can see again how racial discrimination is just there. You don't have to look for it. It just exists. For example, in 2016, black women were the most educated women in America. That came at the end of the year as something to celebrate, right? Yet still black women are the least paid women in America. That's obvious racial discrimination. There's nothing to search, it's there. You go into the schools, black girls are now targeted because first they find ways to target black people. Now, black men specifically, now the black girls in school just opened about 2 weeks ago, and already there are so many stories online about these black girls who have been asked to leave school, suspended and so on because of their hair, because our hair is not straight enough. That's racial discrimination. We talk about the media. The media sensationalizes things, yes, but not to the advantage of black people ever. Truly, because hear this. When a black person commits a crime, a man, immediately he is labeled as a thug or drug dealer. When a white person commits a crime that's more heinous, a black man might shoot another black man, he's a thug or drug dealer. A white person will go into a school and shoot hundreds of people, and he is mentally ill. He has a problem. He came from a broken home. The black person may have come from the same situation, but the media doesn't paint it like that. And so the thing is, we act like if we don't say it, racial discrimination is a problem even in our church. And so it does not matter how we try to pretend like it doesn't exist, it exists. And I can go on and give statistics about how black people, racial discrimination is a problem specifically for black people in the West, more than anybody else, and minorities. So yes, somebody might say, oh, it doesn't exist, or I've seen it there, but black people are the ones who are on the bad side of that fence. They're the ones who have laws. When a black person commits a crime, or crimes that are generally committed by black men, have stringent life sentences or sentences to it in general. When people of other races, especially white people, commit crimes, they get more lenient sentencing. These things are there. The system, they call it systemic racism. It's there. It's structured, built in, so that more black people will be incarcerated. And if I have to start on our church, it's the same bill that we have in the church. And so I think it's a serious problem, not just in the Western world, but in our Seventh-day Adventist Church. And the same systemic issues that they have in the US, we have it built in our church structure as well.
And, well, when you read different literature, you'll find all different kinds of results. The problem here is that this media that you're referring to is the same media that Christians and non-Christians, Adventists and non-Adventists, East and Westerners watch. And when this is bombarded in people's brains all the time, we will end up believing the same thing. It doesn't matter if it is done to what color, but the moment something is said over and over and over and over, it's like those who have children. You keep telling your child, you are a problematic child, you are a problematic child, you are a problematic child. And everybody hears that in the community. Guess what? Everybody will believe that. And anything that happens, it's because that is a problematic child. And this can happen in any place in the world. It may not be one way. I think it's several ways that are involved here. Let's go to Dr. Gavasiano.
Well, you see, I want to affirm that racial discrimination is not a Caucasian problem or a Western problem. It's a human heart problem, as I said at the beginning. Having said that, I just want to mention that racial discrimination is really serious. But if you look at the United States from a sociological perspective, you'll find that America is one of the most diverse countries in the world. So it makes it a very interesting target to study racism and all that. And you just want to look at the word study to see the seriousness of racism. You want also to look at the racial laws that have been enacted, not only in the United States, but in other places. So if you look at the word study, there's something like, when the cop stops an African person, there's an expression like driving while black, all right? And this is something that you read in every newspaper, most of the newspapers there, and the victims, perceived victims, they would really confirm that they believe they were stopped because they were black. That's how serious things are. And then you have something like the President Barack Obama's affirmative action. This is more like the lioness trying to help the weaker cub and so forth, you see. So if you look at the laws themselves, there's this Racial Discrimination Act of 1975, which is effectively trying to protect the minorities or whoever who can be victimized by racial discrimination. It's not only the US, you have the Western countries also, they do have laws that protect against discrimination. I just want to conclude on this section on perhaps two things. It's a human heart. Today, those who practice discrimination are usually those people who have the power, the privilege, and the control and the authority. It doesn't matter who they are. Statistics are projecting that in the United States, the largest minority, which is Hispanics today, in about 50 years, they are going to be the majority. So you can expect a US president who is Hispanic during that time. I want to tell you that because it's a human heart problem, some people will be crying foul that the Hispanic government the US government is being racist. But anyway, tendencies. We will deal with that one a little later. The last one, please don't stop me. The last one, in Italy, there is a top senator who makes a comment about an African minister of integration, who is the first African minister. I think her name is Cecily Kayenge, something from the DRC. So this Italian minister, probably from the right wing, is not happy with her appointment. And he begins to make statements that her features are like that of the orangutan, if I'm pronouncing it right, which is some kind of a monkey. And that's terrible. And they continues to say, well, why don't you go and serve as a cabinet minister in Africa? This is how serious it is. And I think it should be remedied. It's a human heart problem. It's not so-and-so or a certain group of people's program. We have a problem here.
Thank you so much. We have run out of time. I'm going to give you 1 minute and we'll go to this as our last question. What are some of the things done here at IS that could count as racial discrimination? Maybe they are done. People don't even know that it is. I remember, for example, I was traveling to another island here in the Philippines, and I remember somebody calling me, "Hey, Negro! Negro, where are you going?" You know, I was like, okay, this is the 21st century. You don't call a black man Negro, you know. It's just a little too much. And I remember going to a barber shop here in the Philippines, and somebody told me, you know, your hair is like the hair of a monkey. You know, it's like, are you serious about this? So some things like those, some say this because they want to make you laugh. They may probably, some of them may not really mean that, but actually it is related to racial discrimination. So I'll give you just 1 minute each, something you have seen or heard or experienced that you feel this would count as racial discrimination, so that people be aware that we do not say or do something like that. 1 minute each. We're going to start with Dr. Nadine and end with Dr. Gabastiani. Okay, let's start with you.
Well, I don't really have a whole lot of complaints, and I'm not going to look too hard for something if things are going fairly well. Maybe there is some racial discrimination, and I'm just not noticing it. That's a fact. I'm just not going to worry about that too much. But one thing is, there's a difference between racial discrimination and in-group preferences. I used to think that certain groups were pretty racist, usually around the Asia area when I was younger, and then I realized, no, it's just in-group preference. So I've learned not to show the same disdain for in-group preferences that I would towards racial discrimination. And when that's happened, my time everywhere on this hemisphere has been much easier.
Thank you so much. Translation, let's not always cling to the people of our race. When we have different group activities, mingle with people from different countries, different groups, cultural groups, ethnic groups, different racial groups. Let's go to Andrew. We'll come back to you, Dr. Nadine.
My experience at IS is, well, I've been on campus going to church here for 4 years, but as a student, I've only been coming here for about 2 months. So I really don't have enough experience outside of IS. Yes, I could say there is some. Mostly when we go to the market, if I walk anywhere close to my Filipino wife, the prices immediately go up by 20 or 30 pesos.
There you go. There you go. There you go.
But that's, you know, that's an assumption, and you have to learn to barter to deal with that. But that's the only thing I can say. Oh, and my name is Joe outside.
Yes, I have been called Joe several times too. That's better than being called, you know, the hair is like the hair of a monkey. All right.
Well, I'm going to disappoint you because I'm fairly new here at IS. So I would like to agree with one of the speakers. If you're looking for discrimination in this campus, maybe you should really dig deep and hunt for it. I don't find it at the moment. And I can just make an affirmation that at the Applied Theology Department, the professors there is just a milieu of internationals of different races, Indonesia, Europe, Africa, and so forth. Beautiful place.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you. Let's go. You say the last word.
Yeah, I have not systemic stuff. I have not personally could say, okay, hey, this happened to me because of race. I've noticed a lot of things happening, though, to people of a similar race. And this is what really racial discrimination speaks to. Discrimination against people of a same race, and that race has to be with things that are common among these people. So I look at campus and I can think of a specific problem that was there before I came to campus, was there while I was on campus, and I left 4 years ago and I'm back and I still hear that it exists. Or one particular group of people, then it must be racial discrimination. But we don't talk about it. But the problem is there.
So how do you think it should be addressed? That's the last thing.
Well, truthfully, I personally believe that God has given us minds to think and also given us mouths to speak. I think as I've spoken to people, they have shared that they did make complaints and so on. And I think maybe more action should be taken in that regard to deal with this specific issue that continues to happen to just one race of people on this campus. And so because that is there, the evidence is clear, people are aware of it. I think maybe it needs to be addressed more formally. Maybe we need to have some outside intervention. Something needs to be done because it didn't happen to me, but it's been happening to people. And I think one of the biggest problems that we have as a church and as a people goes okay, first we blind our eyes to things. And Abraham Lincoln says, one of the greatest ways for evil to persist is for good men to say nothing. And we sit idly by and become complicit to things that are affecting other people, but because it doesn't affect me or my family personally, it's not a problem. And I think as Christians, that is a serious issue that we have. We don't care about race issues until it comes to our home. We don't care about people's particular plights until it affects your family, and that's selfish, and that's not Christian. And so I think that's one of the reasons why we are not involved in social justice as we should be. Adventist people will not get involved until it affects our church, and that's not right, because our silence is consent. It says that we are complicit to the injustice of other people. And I think on this campus, anybody whose hair long enough will know exactly what I'm talking about, and it needs to be addressed. And so the only reason why I could classify it as racial discrimination, it's because from the history of it, we only see it happening to one group of people.
Thank you so much, Dr. Nadine, and thank you everyone for sharing your opinions, your experiences with us. One thing that I want to end with, and that is actually being colorblind should not be something we celebrate. The fact that we do not recognize the different colors, the different races, we're putting a blind eye on the issues and we pat ourselves on the back that there is no problem. We need to know that there are Indonesians and the Koreans and the Japanese and the Kenyans and South Africans and Americans and Peruvians, so that we know how to deal with that diversity. And that's the reason why we have this program, United in Diversity. If you have questions and comments and opinions, please write to us at united@is.edu so that we can continue interacting and improving our program. As you can see, we don't really have a whole lot of time to address this complex issue, but please watch for the next program where we're going to look at this from the Asian perspective and the African perspective. Until we meet again, we want to encourage you to be united in diversity. Thank you.